A lot of people I've spoken to who have ended up doing entrepreneurial things have started from the I knew how to make websites. These days, I feel like the kids are less into websites and apps and just more into content. Once you have that confidence that you can make something from nothing, then the ideas start to flow. Like, Ben, thank you so much for joining in the apartment. Welcome to the podcast, to the channel, whatever we're going to call this.
Thank you for having me. I've been watching you for a long time, so it's a bit surreal to actually be here. But thanks for having me.
I mean, that feels very bizarre because I've been following you for a long time as well. I think Gymshark came on my radar about like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. I just fell in love with the clothing line. And then when I saw that like Gymshark athletes were a thing, it sort of became a thing in my mind that, one day I'd love to be a Gymshark athlete, just as a sort of something to work towards. So it feels very surreal that we're sitting here now having this conversation.
Amazing.
I saw something interesting on your Wikipedia page when I did a bit of a stalk, which said that your very first business was selling license plates.
Yeah.
What was the story there?
So when I was a kid, our next door neighbour, who's some of my closest friends, basically, my best friend and his dad, they were just massively into cars, number plates, all that sort of stuff for whatever reason. And there was this bit where I think they moved into a new style of number plate and you could sort of spell names quite easily. And he would basically sell them, he would buy and he would sell them. And at the time, because I knew how to make websites and stuff, he sort of came to me and he said, can you make a website for this? And long story short, we ended up working together on that and selling plates for a few years. And it went quite well, to be fair. And it was quite fun. And it wasn't like a direct passion of mine. It's something I just fell into because he couldn't take things online and it was something that I knew about.
Nice. Like how did you get started with the website stuff initially?
Ooh. So I was really lucky. So when I was a kid, I was doing my GCSEs, and I wasn't particularly great at school. Not that I wasn't like a naughty kid or whatever. It just for whatever reason it didn't identify with me particularly well, and I probably didn't put enough effort in, and then as a result didn't get good enough grades. When I think it's 16 when you finish school.
Yeah.
I think 16 finishing school. I basically ended up getting into sixth form, but it was under the idea that I had to do English literature as one A-level. I did business as one A-level. And they asked me to do English for some reason because I just happened to do well at it. It was probably the one subject where I didn't have to apply myself to do well, which was weird. Business studies, and I did a BTEC in IT. Now the BTEC in IT was life-changing for me because anyone I'm not sure how it works now, but the old sort of rule of thumb was A-levels was more test-oriented, BTEC was more coursework-oriented. And for me, that was quite cool because it was it felt to me at the time like a practical application of skill.
Yeah.
So in that, one of the modules, you had like your standard modules, but one of them was about web development. And it was really cool for me because it was just a case of make a website. And they gave us access to the Adobe Creative Suite. And that was one of the most pivotal and life-changing moments for me because that's when I ended up learning. I think you could go down two routes. You made a website on front page and you made a website using Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
And it just gave me that basic knowledge of web development. But because we got access to the whole Creative Suite, I then learned how to use Photoshop and Illustrator and all these different things, which anyone that's made websites or anything on, any sort of digital products will know that you can't just have a website without graphics and know how to make all these different things. So, it was through IT, the BTEC IT, which I originally learned how to do things like that.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. So my story is kind of similar. It was IT classes in year 8 when I saw one of the kids in the year above was leaving, and I saw that he'd gone on the Google homepage and he'd right-clicked view source, and there was all this code floating around. Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, this guy's a hacker. I need to I need to understand how this code thing works. And then in ICT classes and then at break times and lunch times, because me and all my friends were nerds, we'd go to the computer room and I started dabbling in web design as well. Started off in front page, pirated Dreamweaver, pirated Photoshop. This was back in the day, Photoshop CS2, things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's so interesting how a lot of people I've spoken to who have ended up doing entrepreneurial things have started from the I knew how to make websites front. Is that something that you've seen as well?
100%, but it's because, and you see this in a lot of areas, right? It's because not that many people were doing it. Because I remember, because then the next step for me, which I didn't learn in IT, but I ended up learning myself, was app development. And it was around 17, 18 years old. I wanted to go into app development because no one else was doing app development. So web development was cool, but it got to the point where it's almost like, when you start to learn a new skill, you learn a lot really quickly, then you get to a level, then it starts to slow down. And it felt like I was at a crossroads. I could either double down on web development and really try and be great at it, but it felt like everyone was doing it. Or I could try app development. I think it was like the Apple SDK, you paid 20, 30, 40 quid, I can't remember what it was. You pay the fee and it basically gives you access to like the SDK basically. So then I moved on to apps. So I think a lot of people did well out of websites sort of in our era because not that many people were doing it and there was so much opportunity. And then I think it went to apps and, now it's sort of beyond that even.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like especially with like websites and apps, and I think now things like TikTok and stuff are where as an individual you don't need to ask anyone's permission. You can just make something completely from scratch.
Yes.
So nowadays it was websites and later on apps, and now these days I feel like the kids are less into websites and apps and just more into content.
Yeah.
Once you have that confidence that you can make something from nothing, then the ideas start to flow like license plates or
Exactly. And so the thing that fascinated me about the web, right, was, and to be honest, it's still the case. So I think a lot of people, a lot of young kids now will look at the web, look at apps, look at social, and they'll think, well, it's all been done, everything's been done, no ideas left, whatever. But there's so much opportunity. We'll look back at this period in 10, 20, 30 years' time as like the moment of opportunity. The thing that I loved about the web, I'll never forget this. So when we first started the Gymshark website, we couldn't really get traffic there. But we then found out that we could make thousands of products in the back end and call them all these different things, and Google Shopping would index them right at the top of the page for free.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like you couldn't do it now, but there was so many little opportunities like that, little hacks, probably too strong a word, but those little hacks and tricks that you could do to sort of get ahead. And I still think there's so many opportunities like that on all these different platforms that we're talking about.
Okay, awesome. So you learn how to do websites with the ITB tech. Then you started doing the license plate selling. How did that business go? Like,
it was all right. We did it for maybe a year or two. So I did it in that period where I was finishing school and then going into university with the guys. It was fun. It was a good learning experience. It was basically your typical website. It was just a selection of pages which showed stock, and then all of the sales would be done on email or on the phone. So again, it gives you that understanding of buying things, selling things, having websites. It wasn't a transactional website. Understanding deals on the phone, that sort of stuff. So it was a great learning curve for me.
Okay. And then what came next? So you said app design came next. How did that happen?
So after that, it was just making apps, and I learned everything I know about app design. Or I say I knew about app design because I wouldn't know where to start now. Everything I knew about app design on YouTube, and I just watched different YouTubers, and they would do like tutorials. And the first couple of apps, the easiest thing I think to make was like a web browser, because it was like it took like 10, 15 minutes to make, sort of thing. Made a couple of different web browsers, and then this is where I started thinking. I sort of built up my skills, and I could do different things. And I thought, right, how can I actually make this practical? And because by this point I was really falling in love with the gym and fitness, that's when I thought, right, maybe I could make some fitness apps. And again, very, very basic, like nothing extraordinary in any way, shape or form. But there were apps where you'd sort of go in and it would have workouts in the app, and then you could go into the calendar section, hit save this 5-day split, and it would automatically populate your calendar with a workout basically, and give you a little reminder to do it. And for me, it was less around almost like the product, but it was my sort of learning curve. And I had this aim of, right, I want to make an app. Then I want to make an app that I can get live on the store. Because Apple had, albeit fairly low guardrails, but they would definitely like double check that the app was sort of robust enough to go on the store. So I really wanted to be able to do that, and made 2 web browsers, which was just basic as anything, 2 fitness apps. And it was basically just around getting in shape.
Oh, wow. So was this while you were at university, or when you were like...
It was either last year at high school, first year at uni. I think it was last year at high school.
Okay, so you were like a full-time student doing like studying and stuff, and then on, I guess, weekends and evenings and school holidays, just like messing around on a computer, making apps.
Which was great fun, because like I said, it just felt like you were doing stuff that no one else was doing. You were doing something that... And because I just love the Apple brand, and I would be that kid that would watch all of the keynotes when Steve Jobs would walk out, and I was just like... I just adored him and the brand so much. For me, it was like that thing of, I just want to be involved in it any way, shape or form. And, you'll know this as well as I do. Then you start learning something and it gets addictive. And then you start going on the forums and you're getting involved in the little communities. And I mean, to this day, I love being involved in all the different communities, like at the time it was app development, web development. Now it's like motorcycles and fitness. But Yeah, it sort of gave me a little bit of a home as well.
Wow.